What does it feel like to stand at the edge of a dream, only to be pushed into the abyss by the one you love most? For Aisha Coleman, that question burned like a wound that refused to heal. In the heart of Silicon Valley, where glass towers gleamed under the California sun and ambition pulsed like electricity, Aisha once believed she had found her place. The boardroom of Next Tech Innovations, a tech giant worth billions, was her battlefield and her sanctuary. As a board member and the wife of CEO Ethan Brooks, she moved through those sleek, sterile halls with purpose, her heels clicking on polished floors, her voice carrying weight in rooms filled with men who rarely looked like her. A black woman, a mother, an environmental activist. She was a force, undeniable and unbroken. But that morning, under the fluorescent glow of the boardroom's vast windows, something shifted. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Aisha stood at the head of the mahogany table, her hands steady as she presented her latest initiative, a plan to halt Nextech's toxic waste dumping in low-income communities. Her slides flashed on the screen, charts of contaminated rivers, photos of children playing near sludge-filled streams, data linking the company's practices to cancer clusters. Her voice, rich and resolute, filled the room, urging the board to pivot toward sustainable tech. She spoke of justice, of legacy, of the daughter she and Ethan were raising, Maya, who deserved a world worth inheriting. The board listened, their faces a mix of boredom and unease. But Ethan, seated at the table's far end, was different. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, not with pride, but with something colder. Aisha had seen that look before, in late-night arguments when she pushed for greener policies, in fleeting moments when his ambition clashed with her ideals. She pressed on, undeterred, her passion a flame that refused to flicker. She believed in him, in them, in the life they'd built together. They'd met in college, two dreamers with nothing but grit and hope, and together they'd climbed to this pinnacle. Surely he'd stand by her. She was wrong. When she finished, silence gripped the room, thick and suffocating. Ethan rose, his tailored suit catching the light, his presence commanding as always. But his words cut like a blade. Aisha's proposal, he began, his voice smooth but laced with venom, is idealistic, but impractical. It threatens our bottom line, our shareholders, our future. The board murmured agreement, emboldened by his lead. Aisha's heart sank, but she held her ground, ready to counter. Then he turned to her, his gaze icy. Effective immediately, Ms. Coleman is relieved of her board position. Her activism has no place here. The room spun. Aisha stood frozen, the weight of his words crushing her. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a betrayal, public and deliberate, delivered by the man who'd vowed to stand by her side. The board avoided her eyes, their silence deafening. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but pride held her tongue. She gathered her notes, her movements slow and deliberate, each step a battle to keep her dignity intact. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, sealing her out of the world she'd helped build. Outside, the Silicon Valley sun blazed, indifferent to her pain. Aisha stood in the parking lot, her reflection distorted in the chrome of a luxury car. She was no longer the board member, the visionary, the wife. She was just a woman, stripped bare by the man she loved. Her phone buzzed, texts from colleagues, polite but distant, already erasing her. She thought of Maya, her 6-year-old daughter, waiting at home with her drawings of trees and rivers. How could she face her, explain that her mother's fight for a better world had cost them everything? She drove home, the hum of the highway a dull roar in her ears. The Brooks mansion, with its sleek lines and manicured lawns, loomed ahead, a monument to their success. But it felt hollow now, a beautiful cage. Inside, Maya ran to her, arms wide, her laughter a fleeting balm. Aisha held her close, burying her face in her daughter's curls, the scent of lavender shampoo grounding her. Ethan would be home soon, expecting her to play the role of the dutiful wife, to swallow this humiliation. But something inside her stirred, a spark, small but fierce, refusing to be snuffed out. She looked out the window, the distant hills of Silicon Valley fading into dusk. Ethan thought he'd silenced her, pushed her out of his world like a discarded piece of code. He was wrong. Aisha Coleman was not a woman who broke. She'd grown up in Oakland, where every day was a fight, where her mother taught her that justice was worth any cost. She'd clawed her way to this boardroom, and she'd claw her way back. For Maya, for the Rivers, for herself. But how does one woman dismantle a tech empire? The answer lay somewhere in the shadows, waiting for her to find it. All right, before you settle in, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely vibing with what I'm putting out here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. In the quiet moments before dawn, when Silicon Valley slept under a blanket of stars, Aisha Coleman stood alone in her backyard, the dew-soaked grass cool beneath her bare feet. The mansion loomed behind her, its glass walls reflecting the first whispers of light, a silent witness to the life she'd lost. Once, this place had been a symbol of triumph, a black woman from Oakland rising to the pinnacle of tech, hand in hand with Ethan Brooks, the man she loved. Now, it felt like a mausoleum, each room echoing the humiliation of that boardroom betrayal. Aisha's hands tightened around a mug of tea, the steam curling upward like a prayer she no longer believed in. She'd been pushed out, erased, but the fire within her refused to die. It flickered, small and stubborn, waiting for fuel. The days after her expulsion from Nextech's board were a blur of silence and survival. Ethan returned home that night, his face a mask of calculated regret, his words dripping with false apologies. "It was for the company," he said, avoiding her eyes, as if she were a problem to be managed, not a wife to be cherished. Aisha didn't scream or cry. She nodded, her lips pressed tight, and retreated to Maya's room, where her daughter's soft breathing became her anchor. But the silence was a lie. Beneath it, a storm raged. Anger at Ethan, grief for the life they'd built, fear for what came next. She was no longer a board member, no longer a power player in Silicon Valley's gleaming arena. She was just Aisha, a mother, a black woman, standing on the edge of an uncertain abyss. The world moved on, indifferent. Colleagues stopped calling, their texts fading into polite excuses. Invitations to galas and tech summits vanished, as if Aisha had been deleted from the industry's code. The mansion, with its infinity pool and smart home gadgets, became a gilded cage. Ethan spent longer hours at Nextech, leaving her to wander its sterile halls, her reflection haunting every glass surface. She avoided the news, but snippets slipped through, articles praising Ethan's bold leadership, glossing over her absence. Each word was a knife, twisting deeper into the wound of her erasure. But Aisha was not built to break. She'd grown up in Oakland's cracked streets, where her mother scrubbed floors to pay for her books, where every dream was a fight against gravity. That resilience, forged in struggle, stirred now. She began in secret, away from Ethan's watchful eyes. In the guest room, converted into a makeshift office, She spread out maps of Nextech's waste sites, reports of contaminated rivers, and emails from affected communities. Her activism, once a boardroom battle, now became a quiet rebellion. She scoured online forums, connecting with environmentalists, mothers, and organizers, people who, like her, refused to let profit poison their homes. Her first step was small, almost invisible. She drove to a community center in East Palo Alto, a world away from Silicon Valley's polished towers. The center, with its peeling paint and flickering lights, buzzed with voices. Black and brown families, workers, elders, all gathered to discuss the toxic runoff seeping into their water. Aisha sat in the back, her tailored coat out of place among worn jeans and hoodies. She listened as they spoke of sick children, dying fish, and a river that no longer sang. Their pain mirrored her own, not just for the land, but for the dignity stolen by those like Ethan, who saw profit in poison. She didn't speak that night, but she returned. Week after week, she brought data, shared strategies, and learned names. Lila, a nurse who tested water samples. Marcus, a teacher who rallied parents. Elena, a grandmother who'd lost a son to leukemia linked to the toxins. They didn't know her as Ethan Brooks' wife or a former board member. To them, she was Aisha, the woman who listened, who cared. Slowly, she wove their stories into a tapestry of resistance, a grassroots movement taking root in the shadow of Silicon Valley's wealth. But the shadow of Ethan loomed large. He noticed her late nights, her quiet intensity, the way she shielded her laptop screen. "What are you working on?" he asked once, his tone casual but sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. Aisha smiled, deflecting, but her pulse raced. She knew he'd crush her movement if he suspected its scope. She began meeting organizers in secret, using cash for gas, avoiding digital trails. Each step was a risk, each meeting a defiance of the man who'd pushed her out. At home, Maya became her light. Aisha taught her to plant seeds in the backyard, their hands digging into the earth. Maya's laughter a reminder of why she fought. But the weight of her secret grew heavier. She couldn't tell Maya the truth, that her father's company poisoned rivers, that her mother was building an army to stop him. She couldn't risk Ethan using Maya to silence her, so she kissed her daughter's forehead each night, whispering promises of a cleaner world, and carried on. One evening, as dusk painted the hills purple, Aisha found a note slipped under her car's wiper. "Stop, or you'll lose more than a board seat." No signature, but the threat carried Ethan's scent. Cold, calculated, untouchable. She stood in the driveway, the note crumpled in her fist, the mansion's lights glowing like a distant star. Fear clawed at her, but so did resolve. Ethan thought he'd buried her. He was wrong. She'd rise, not just for herself, but for every river, every child, every voice silenced by greed. But could she protect Maya from the storm she was summoning? The answer lay in the movement she was building, fragile but growing, waiting for its moment to ignite. How do you measure the weight of a secret when it could save a river but cost you everything? Aisha Coleman carried that question like a stone in her chest, its edges sharp against her resolve. In the cramped community center of East Palo Alto, where the air smelled of old coffee and resilience, she stood before a growing crowd, mothers clutching worn purses, workers in faded jackets, teenagers with eyes full of fire. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows on the peeling walls, but Aisha's presence burned steady, a beacon in a room weary of broken promises. She wasn't the polished board member anymore, not the wife of Nextech's CEO. She was Aisha, the woman from Oakland who'd learned to fight before she learned to dream, and now she was building something bigger than herself, a movement to reclaim the rivers poisoned by her husband's empire. Weeks had passed since the note under her wiper, its threat lingering like a bruise. Aisha moved carefully, her steps calculated to avoid Ethan's gaze. He was home less often, consumed by Nextech's expansion, but his absence didn't mean safety. She'd caught him watching her once, his eyes narrowing as she slipped her laptop into a bag before a meeting. She'd smiled, deflecting with talk of Maya's school, but her pulse hammered. Ethan wasn't just a CEO, he was a strategist, ruthless in protecting his throne. If he suspected her organizing, he'd crush it, and her, without hesitation. Yet Aisha pressed on, driven by the faces in the community center, by the stories of sickness and loss, by the memory of her mother's voice. Justice don't come cheap, baby. Her movement grew, fragile but fierce. She met with organizers in church basements, in backyards under starlit skies, in diners where the coffee was bitter but the resolve was sweet. Lila, the nurse, brought water samples showing toxin levels that made Aisha's stomach churn. Marcus, the teacher, rallied parents to demand clean schools. Elena, the grandmother, shared photos of her son, lost to cancer, her trembling hands a silent plea. Aisha wove their efforts together, her nights spent drafting petitions, mapping waste sites, and building a network of activists across California. She used burner phones, avoided emails, and met in person, her caution a shield against Ethan's reach. Each meeting was a spark, each voice a flame, and together they were kindling a fire Nextech couldn't ignore. But fires attract attention. Aisha felt the eyes on her, strangers lingering too long at meetings, cars idling outside the community center. She changed routes, varied schedules, but the weight of being watched pressed harder. One night, as she drove home from a rally, headlights followed her through the winding roads of Palo Alto. The car stayed close, its presence a silent threat, until she pulled into a gas station, heart pounding, and watched it vanish into the dark. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale, the note's words echoing, "You'll lose more than a board seat." Ethan's hand was behind it, she was sure, but proving it was another matter. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly, like a crack in a dam. At a meeting, Marcus handed her a USB drive, his face taut with urgency. "A friend at Nextech leaked this," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "Internal memos. Be careful." Aisha took it, her fingers trembling, and rushed home, locking herself in the guest room. The mansion's silence was oppressive, its luxury a mockery of her fight. She plugged the USB into her laptop, her breath catching as files loaded, emails between Ethan and Nextech's COO, memos approving illegal waste dumping, budgets hiding cleanup costs. One email, from Ethan himself, was a dagger. "Bury the reports. No one cares about those communities." Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just negligence. It was a choice, deliberate and cruel, to poison for profit. She copied the files, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. This was the weapon she'd needed, the proof that could topple Ethan's empire. But it came with a cost. Exposing him meant exposing their life, her marriage, her daughter's world. Maya, with her crayons and dreams of clean rivers, didn't know her father's hands were stained with the toxins Aisha fought. Could she shatter that innocence? She thought of Elena's photos, of Lila's water samples, of the children who deserved better. The choice was clear, but it cut deep. She contacted a lawyer, Nia Thompson, a black woman known for taking on corporate giants. Nia's office, tucked in a modest Oakland building, was a far cry from Nextech's glass towers, but her presence was a force, calm, unyielding, her eyes sharp with purpose. Aisha shared the USB, her voice steady as she outlined her plan, a public expose at Nextech's shareholder meeting, timed to maximize impact. Nia nodded, her pen tapping softly. "This could end him," she said, "but they'll come for you. Hard." Aisha didn't flinch. She'd faced worse than Ethan's wrath. Oakland streets, her mother's sacrifices, her own climb through a world that rarely welcomed her. She was ready. Back home, she hid the USB in a locked box under Maya's bed, the safest place she could think of. She kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering promises of a better tomorrow. But as she stood in the mansion's shadowed hallway, a new note awaited, slipped through the mail slot. "You can't hide forever." Her breath caught, the paper trembling in her hand. Ethan was closing in, his reach longer than she'd feared. The hills outside glowed under the moon, but their beauty felt like a lie. Aisha's movement was growing, her proof was in hand, but the storm was near. Could she protect Maya and her allies before Ethan struck? The answer lay in the fire she'd kindled, burning brighter with each passing day, waiting to consume or be consumed. Sometimes, courage is not a roar, but a whisper, a choice made in the quiet of a heart stretched thin. Aisha Coleman felt that whisper as she stood in the dim glow of a street lamp outside Nia Thompson's Oakland office, the night air thick with the scent of eucalyptus and distant rain. The city hummed beyond, its pulse a reminder of the world she was fighting to save, a world of clean rivers, safe homes, and a future for her daughter Maya. But the weight of that fight pressed against her, heavier now, as the threats from Ethan Brooks grew sharper, their edges cutting closer to everything she held dear. In her purse, the USB drive burned like a coal, its data a ticking bomb that could topple Nextech's empire. Yet bombs, Aisha knew, could destroy their wielders too. The weeks since receiving the leaked memos had been a tightrope walk. Aisha's movement swelled, its roots spreading from East Palo Alto to Oakland, San Jose, and beyond. Community centers buzzed with new faces, factory workers, students, elders, all drawn by the promise of justice. Lila's water samples became rallying cries, Marcus's petitions gathered thousands of signatures, and Elena's story of loss fueled marches that snaked through city streets. Aisha coordinated in secret, her days spent in borrowed offices, her nights poring over legal briefs with Nia. The shareholder meeting loomed, a stage where she'd expose Ethan's crimes before the world. But each step toward that moment felt like walking through a minefield. Ethan's pursuit was relentless. The notes multiplied, slipped under doors, tucked into mailboxes, each one a shard of ice. "You're playing with fire. Think of Maya." Aisha changed her routes, used cash, avoided her phone, but the sense of being watched clung like damp fog. One evening, as she left a rally, a man in a dark hoodie followed her, his shadow trailing hers through Oakland's neon-lit streets. She ducked into a bodega, heart hammering, and waited until he passed, his face hidden but his intent clear. She told no one, not Lila, not Marcus, not even Nia. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when the movement depended on her. Home offered no refuge. The mansion, with its marble floors and smart lights, felt like a stage where Ethan played the doting husband, his smiles masking a predator's calculation. He'd begun questioning Maya, his tone light but probing. "What's Mommy working on, sweetheart?" Aisha deflected, keeping Maya close, but the strain showed. Maya, sensing the tension, clung to her mother, her drawings of rivers now tinged with gray. Aisha's heart ached, torn between shielding her daughter and fighting for the world she deserved. She hid the USB in a locked box under the guest room floorboards, its contents copied to a secure cloud Naya controlled. But security was an illusion when Ethan's reach seemed endless. The breakthrough came in a moment of desperation. Aisha, sleepless, sifted through the USB's files, her eyes burning under the guest room's dim lamp. A hidden folder buried in encrypted code caught her attention. She sent it to Nia, who worked with a hacker contact to unlock it. The contents were a revelation: audio recordings of Ethan's meetings, his voice cold as he ordered the cover-up of waste dumping, dismissed health risks, and mocked the communities Aisha fought for. "They'll never fight back," he said, laughter in his tone. The words seared her, not just for their cruelty, but for the man she'd once loved, now a stranger wearing his face. Nia called it a gold mine. "This is our kill shot," she said, her voice steady but electric. They refined their plan. Aisha would speak at the shareholder meeting, presenting the recordings alongside the memos, backed by Nia's legal filings. The media, tipped off by anonymous leaks, would amplify the fallout. But the risk was staggering. Ethan's team was circling, their surveillance tightening. Aisha's car was tampered with, tires slashed, a warning etched in the paint. "Back off!" She rented a cheap sedan, parked it blocks away, but the message lingered. Ethan wasn't just threatening her career. He was threatening her life, Maya's life, the movement's life. She confided in Lila, whose quiet strength anchored her. In a church basement, surrounded by folding chairs and the hum of a faulty heater, Lila took her hand. "We're with you," she said, her eyes fierce. "This isn't just your fight." The words steadied Aisha, but doubt gnawed. Could she lead them into this storm? She thought of her mother, who'd marched for civil rights, her hands calloused but unbowed. She thought of Maya, sleeping under a blanket of stars Aisha had painted on her ceiling. She couldn't stop, not when the rivers were choking, not when the truth was within reach. One night, as rain lashed the mansion's windows, Aisha found a new note, this time inside her locked car. Last chance. Her breath caught, the paper trembling in her hand. She looked at the mansion, its lights glowing like a false promise, and felt the weight of every choice she'd made. The shareholder meeting was days away, the recordings ready, the movement poised. But Ethan's shadow was closing in, and Aisha knew he'd strike before she could. Could she outrun him, protect Maya, and light the spark that would change everything? The answer lay in the fire she'd built, burning bright but fragile, waiting for its moment to roar. Can a single spark survive a deluge, or does it drown in the flood of fear? Aisha Coleman carried that question like a heartbeat, each pulse a reminder of the storm she'd summoned. In the pre-dawn hush of her Silicon Valley mansion, she sat in the guest room, the only space still hers in a house that felt like a stranger's. The locked box under the floorboards held the USB drive, its recordings a guillotine poised above Ethan Brooks's empire. Outside, the manicured lawns glistened with dew, the glass walls reflecting a world of wealth and deception. But inside, Aisha's world was narrowing, the walls closing in as Ethan's threats grew bolder, their shadows stretching toward her daughter Maya and the movement she'd built from ashes. The shareholder meeting was 2 days away, a ticking clock that measured her courage in seconds. Aisha and Nia Thompson had spent weeks refining their plan, each detail a thread in a tapestry of justice. The recordings, Ethan's voice coldly ordering the cover-up of toxic waste dumping, would headline Naya's legal filings, backed by memos, water samples, and community testimonies. Lila, Marcus, and Elena had mobilized hundreds, their rallies spreading from East Palo Alto to Sacramento, their voices a chorus demanding clean rivers. Aisha coordinated from the shadows, her burner phone buzzing with updates, her nights spent in Nia's Oakland office, where coffee cups piled high and hope battled exhaustion. The media, tipped off by Carla Rivera, a journalist ally, waited to amplify the exposé. Everything was ready. Almost. Ethan's pursuit was a noose tightening. The notes had stopped, replaced by actions that cut deeper. Aisha's bank account was frozen, flagged for suspicious activity, a move she knew bore Ethan's fingerprints. Her car's GPS was hacked, logging her movements until she disabled it. At a rally, a drone hovered overhead, its lens glinting like a predator's eye. She told no one, not even Nia, but the fear was a constant companion, a cold hand on her shoulder. Ethan wasn't just protecting Nextech, he was waging war, and Aisha was his target. She moved Maya to her mother's house in Oakland, citing a school break. But the lie tasted bitter. Maya's questions, "Why can't Daddy come?" were knives, each one twisting in Aisha's heart. Her resolve was tested in a moment that felt like fate's cruel jest. Late one night, as she reviewed filings in Naya's office, the power cut out, plunging the room into darkness. A crash echoed downstairs, glass shattering like a scream. Aisha froze, her pulse roaring, the USB in her hand suddenly heavy as lead. Footsteps thudded below, deliberate and unhurried. She grabbed her phone, texting Nia, "Intruder, call police," and slipped under the desk, her breath shallow. The footsteps climbed, pausing outside the door. A shadow moved, silhouetted against the window's faint glow. Then, silence. Minutes stretched into eternity until sirens wailed in the distance and the shadow vanished. The police found no one, only a broken window and a brick wrapped in a note. "You were warned." Aisha didn't sleep that night. She sat in her mother's Oakland living room, Maya curled against her, the USB now hidden in a locket around her neck. Her mother, gray-haired and unbowed, brewed tea and said nothing, her silence a strength Aisha clung to. The break-in wasn't random. Ethan, or his hired hands, was closing in, sensing the trap she'd set. She considered stopping, for Maya's sake, for her own. But the faces of her movement, Lila's determination, Marcus's hope, Elena's grief, haunted her. So did the rivers, their waters choked with toxins, their voices silenced by greed. Stopping wasn't an option. It never had been. She met Nia at dawn, the Oakland skyline a jagged silhouette against a pink sky. Nia's face was grim, her usual calm frayed. "They're on to you," she said, handing Aisha a burner phone with end-to-end encryption. "We move now, or we lose everything." They finalized the plan. Aisha would infiltrate the shareholder meeting using a forged press pass, bypassing Nextech's security. Carla would broadcast live, ensuring the world heard Ethan's crimes. Lila and Marcus would lead a protest outside, amplifying the pressure. But Nia's eyes held a warning. "If this fails, Ethan won't just ruin you, he'll erase you." Aisha returned to the mansion, its opulence a stark contrast to the fight ahead. She packed a small bag, leaving no trace of her plans. Maya's drawings, pinned to the fridge, stopped her. A river, blue and alive, with a stick figure Aisha smiling. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. She kissed the drawing, a silent vow to make it real. Ethan was out, his absence a brief reprieve, but she felt his presence in every camera, every locked door. She slipped out, the locket heavy against her chest, its contents her only weapon. As she drove to Oakland, the Silicon Valley hills blurred past, their beauty a lie masking poisoned waters. Aisha's movement was ready, her allies steadfast, but Ethan's shadow loomed larger than ever. The meeting was tomorrow, the stage set for her return. But could she step into the light without losing Maya, her allies, herself? The answer lay in the fire she'd nurtured, its flames high but fragile, waiting to consume or be extinguished. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. What does it mean to reclaim a world stolen from you when the thief is the one you once loved? Aisha Coleman stood at the edge of that question, her heart a drumbeat in the sterile grandeur of Nextech's shareholder meeting. The conference hall in Silicon Valley shimmered with wealth, crystal chandeliers casting prisms on marble floors, suits tailored to perfection, and the hum of power that clung to every handshake. Outside, Lila, Marcus, and Elena led a protest, their chants a faint pulse through the glass walls. Clean rivers, now! Inside, Aisha blended into the press gallery, her forged badge a fragile shield. The locket around her neck, hiding the USB with Ethan's damning recordings, felt heavier than ever. Today, she'd light the fire she'd nurtured for a decade, or watch it consume her. The hall buzzed with anticipation, shareholders and media unaware of the storm brewing. Ethan Brooks took the stage, his presence magnetic, his smile a polished weapon. He spoke of innovation, profits, Nextech's bright future, his voice weaving a spell over the crowd. Aisha watched from the shadows, her breath shallow, the man she'd married now a stranger cloaked in ambition. His eyes swept the room, confident, untouchable, missing her entirely. She clutched the locket, its metal warm against her skin, and thought of Maya, safe with her mother in Oakland, her drawings of blue rivers a beacon in Aisha's mind. This was for her, for Lila, for Elena, for every silenced voice. Carla Rivera, stationed among the journalists, caught Aisha's eye, a nod signaling the broadcast was live. Nia Thompson waited in the wings, legal filings ready to bury Nextech. The moment came when Ethan opened the floor to questions. Aisha stepped forward, her heels clicking like a metronome of fate. The crowd turned, murmurs rippling as they recognized her, not the board member, not the wife, but a ghost they'd erased. Ethan froze, his smile faltering, a crack in his armor. She didn't flinch. "Aisha Coleman," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the hum. "I have evidence that Nextech under Ethan Brooks has poisoned communities with illegal waste dumping." The room erupted. Shareholders gasped, cameras flashed, Ethan's face drained of color. He tried to interrupt, his voice sharp, but Aisha pressed on, unshaken. She held up the USB, its contents projected on the screen by Carla's team. Emails, memos, and then the recordings. Ethan's voice, cold and mocking, ordering cover-ups, dismissing lives. "Bury the reports," he'd said. "No one cares." The crowd recoiled, their murmurs turning to outrage. Aisha's words were a blade, each one slicing deeper. "This is not innovation. This is destruction, and it ends today." Ethan lunged for the microphone, his composure shattered. "Lies!" he shouted. But the evidence was undeniable, the recordings looping on the screen, his own words a noose. Naya stepped forward, presenting filings to the stunned board, demanding Ethan's removal and criminal charges. Outside, the protest's chants grew louder, a chorus of justice breaking through the glass. Security moved toward Aisha, but shareholders blocked them, their anger now aimed at Ethan. He stood alone on the stage, a king dethroned, his eyes wild as police entered, summoned by Nia's preemptive call. Cuffs clicked around his wrists, the sound sharp against the hall's opulence. He looked at Aisha, not with remorse but with fury, and she met his gaze unyielding. The hall emptied in chaos, media swarming, shareholders shouting, but Aisha stood still, the locket cool against her chest. She'd done it. Ethan was gone. Nextech's crimes exposed, her movement ignited. Carla's broadcast went viral, sparking protests nationwide, from California to Flint. But victory was bittersweet. She drove to Oakland, the hills blurring past, and found Maya in her mother's garden, clutching a drawing of a river, now vibrant blue. Aisha knelt, tears falling as she held her daughter, the weight of her fight settling into her bones. She'd won, but at what cost? Her marriage was ash, her daughter's world reshaped. Then came the twist, sharp and unexpected. A week later, as Aisha sorted through hate mail and support letters, a package arrived, unmarked, slipped under her mother's door. Inside was a single photo, Maya, playing in the garden, taken days after Ethan's arrest. No note, but the message was clear. Ethan's allies, still loyal, were watching. Aisha's breath caught, fear clawing at her, but then she saw a letter tucked beneath the photo, from Lila. "We've started a national coalition, named for you. The rivers will run clean. We won't stop." Her fear softened, replaced by a fire that burned brighter than ever. She stood in the garden, Maya's laughter ringing, the Oakland sky wide and endless. Aisha had toppled an empire, but the fight wasn't over. Ethan's shadow lingered, his allies a threat, but so did her movement, now ablaze across the nation. She'd lost a husband, a board seat, a life, but she'd gained a legacy. For Maya, for the rivers, for every soul who dared to dream of justice. What would you do to keep that fire burning? Aisha knew her answer, etched in every step she'd taken, every river she'd fought for, every dawn she'd faced unbroken. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.